Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a story like this. Now let's get into it. Most people imagine betrayal as something explosive. They picture shouting matches, shattered glass, or a door slammed forever. But in my family, betrayal never made noise. It whispered. It sounded like the faint slide of expensive paper across a marble tabletop. It was Christmas Eve, exactly 6 p.m. outside. The Chicago wind screamed in from the lake. Inside my parents' North Shore mansion, everything was calm, too calm. The air was warm, heavy with the scent of pine needles and costly perfume. I stood in the foyer with my coat still on when my mother, Susan, approached me. She didn't hug me. She didn't ask how the drive was. Instead, she placed a single sheet of thick, cream-colored cardstock into my hands. "We found something for you," she said lightly, the same tone someone might use to offer dessert. "Since you're still floating, the Vanderbilts are looking for a live-in nanny." She continued without pause. "It's full-time. We've already arranged an interview for tomorrow morning." I lowered my eyes to the paper. It was a neatly printed itinerary. Job interview, nanny position. Requirements, basic childcare, light housekeeping, meal preparation. "It fits your skill set," Susan added, smiling. That small, controlled smile she always wore when she was being deliberately unkind. "And it includes room and board, so rent won't be an issue." I didn't blink. I didn't cry. I just stared at the page as the familiar chill spread through my chest. To them, I wasn't a daughter. I was labor, an inconvenience that needed managing, a drifting failure whose highest qualification, in their eyes, was cleaning up after wealthy neighbors' children. They believed I was broke. They believed I was lost. What they didn't know, what they couldn't imagine, was that while they were quietly arranging my future as domestic help, I was finalizing the purchase of a company valued at $4.8 billion. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to see who's part of this community. A moment later, my father, Brian, entered the foyer. He carried himself with the rigid, practiced posture of a man who had spent 4 decades in boardrooms, convinced authority bent reality to his will. He didn't glance at the nanny paperwork in my hand. Instead, his eyes went to my snow-scuffed boots, then to my coat, 3 seasons old. To him, these weren't personal choices. They were proof of my financial failure. He slipped a red envelope from the inner pocket of his blazer. He didn't hand it to me, he held it out, waiting for me to reach for it. A quiet power move he'd mastered back when I was 6 years old. "Your mother is concerned," he said softly, as though discussing a medical diagnosis. "She thinks you're not eating properly. And with the holidays," he paused, "we can't have you looking desperate. It reflects badly on the family." I took the envelope. It was heavy. I already knew what was inside, but I opened it anyway. Crisp, new $100 bills stared back at me. A quick count put it around $8,500. "Think of it as a bridge loan," Brian said, adjusting his cufflinks. "Just until you secure that position with the Vanderbilts. Get yourself presentable. Buy some respectable clothes. And for God's sake, don't mention this to Zachary. He already thinks we coddle you." I looked at the cash, then at the polished marble beneath my feet, then up at the crystal chandeliers scattering light across ceilings I knew by heart. My father believed this was generosity. He saw himself as the generous patriarch throwing a rope to his struggling daughter. What he didn't know, what would have shattered him, was that he was standing in my house. 5 years earlier, Brian's guaranteed investments had collapsed overnight. Foreclosure loomed weeks away. He was terrified, not of losing the house, but of the country club whispers, the public humiliation. He never told me. He only confided in his lawyer. But I already knew. By then, I had finished building the core algorithms for Neuralink AI. I had liquidity, but I didn't write him a check. His pride would never survive being rescued by the daughter he saw as directionless. So I bought the debt. Through a shell company, North Shore Holdings, I purchased the mortgage outright. For 60 months, I had been the invisible force keeping everything intact. Every month, money flowed from my main account to that shell company, covering principal, interest, and property taxes. Brian didn't own this estate. He lived in it. And I was the landlord who had never once demanded rent. I glanced again at the $8,500 in my hand. The irony was sharp, almost metallic. This wasn't a gift. It was an unintentional refund, just a fraction of the hundreds of thousands I'd quietly spent protecting his image. I felt no gratitude, no sadness, just the cold satisfaction of a perfectly balanced ledger. Thank you, I said evenly, sliding the envelope into my coat pocket. I'll make sure it's used exactly where it belongs. He nodded, pleased. The transaction in his mind was complete. His authority restored. Dinner's in 10 minutes, he said. Try not to embarrass us. Then he walked toward the dining room, his footsteps echoing across floors I paid for, beneath a roof I owned, secure in a reality that wasn't real at all. I watched him leave, touched the envelope in my pocket. It wasn't charity. It was a dividend. Dinner took place in the formal dining room, a vast space centered around a long mahogany table built for 20, though only 5 seats were filled. My Aunt Patricia was there, reeking of gin and expensive hairspray. She sat beside Susan, the two of them flanking Brian like stone sentinels guarding a gate. I sat at the far end, directly across from my brother Zachary. Zachary was 32, a high-powered corporate lawyer at one of the city's most elite firms. He wore success like armor. Before touching his food, he checked his Rolex, a brand-new Submariner, then smirked. So, he said loudly, I hear about the nanny job. Good for you, Anna. Honest work builds character. It's a wonderful opportunity, Susan added, passing the potatoes. The Vanderbilts are lovely people. I sliced my steak. I'm not taking it. Every fork froze. Zachary laughed sharply. Of course you're not. Why work when you can just drift, right? Must be nice. Meanwhile, some of us are actually hustling. He leaned back, swirling his wine. Speaking of hustling, you won't believe what landed on my desk today. My firm is this close to landing the deal of the century. Brian straightened. Oh, Neuralink AI, Zachary said slowly, enjoying the moment. Valuation just hit $4.8 billion. They're shopping for legal counsel ahead of their IPO. He tapped his chest. And guess who's leading the pitch? He grinned. If I land this, partnership is guaranteed. Millions in retainers alone. I chewed calmly. Neuralink AI. My company. The one I built from a basement server farm into the world's leading brain computer interface firm. The one my brother was bragging about conquering. The founder's a mystery, Zachary continued, leaning in. Total ghost. No one knows who they are. Probably some socially awkward genius hiding in a bunker. But I'll get to him. He smiled confidently. I always do. I studied him. Truly studied him. And what I saw wasn't confidence, it was hunger. A raw, aching need to be admired, flickering behind his eyes. An ego so brittle it depended on my shortcomings to survive. And suddenly everything clicked. It wasn't enough for them to believe I'd failed. They required it. My failure was essential. If I was cast as the nanny, then Zachary got to play the Titan. My lack of drive validated his ambition. My empty bank account justified his success. I wasn't just a comparison, I was the baseline, the control variable in their carefully curated experiment of superiority. Without me beneath them, there was no one to tower over. I wasn't merely a disappointment. I was a tool, a load-bearing pillar holding up their self-worth. What makes you think you can land them? I asked softly. Zachary's lips curled into a smug grin. Because I understand how these tech guys operate. They want confidence, authority, someone who walks into a room and commands it. Not something you'd get, Anna. No offense. None taken, I replied evenly. It's a whole different arena, Brian chimed in, nodding like a sage. High pressure. Huge money. Not for the weak. Zachary thrives there. And you'll need something else entirely with the Vanderbilt kids, Patricia giggled. Maybe Zachary can give you a job once he makes partner. Do law firms need someone to water the plants? Laughter rippled around the table, warm, practiced, familiar. The sound of the pecking order being lovingly reinforced. I lowered my gaze to my plate. I thought about the email waiting in my inbox, the one from Zachary's managing partner, practically pleading for a meeting with Neuralink's leadership. I thought about the rejection response I'd already composed in my head. I took a calm sip of water. I wouldn't count on it, Zachary, I said lightly. I've heard the founder is selective. He scoffed. Please, everyone's got a price. Everyone wants proximity to the winner, and right now that's me. He lifted his glass. To Neuralink, and to finally getting Anna off the payroll. Glasses clinked. Crystals sang out, bright, celebratory. I didn't lift mine. I simply watched them, the realization settling in with icy precision. They weren't sharing a meal with a failure. They were eating with the executioner. And the final course was approaching. Dessert arrived, lemon tart, sharp, acidic. Much like the conversation. Susan leaned forward, her expression tight with nerves. You really must confirm the interview time, Anna, she said, her voice climbing. Mrs. Vanderbilt expects you at 8 sharp. First impressions matter. I'm not going, I repeated, my patience fraying. Of course you are, Brian barked. Don't be difficult. It's an opportunity. At that exact moment, the massive television above the fireplace flickered. The silent football game vanished, replaced by a bold red breaking news banner. No sound, but the headline was unmistakable. Bloomberg Technology, mystery solved. Zachary, mid-text beneath the table, glanced up. Brian snatched the remote and unmuted the screen. A Bloomberg anchor's urgent voice filled the room, crisp and decisive, closing months of speculation across Silicon Valley. The founder of Neuralink AI, the secretive tech unicorn recently valued at $4.8 billion, has finally been identified. The company, which made headlines last week after restoring mobility to more than 50,000 paralyzed patients, has been led by a single reclusive CEO since its inception. The room froze. Zachary leaned forward, eyes locked on the screen. Here it comes, he murmured. The ghost. Sources now confirm the founder is 29-year-old Anna Vance. The name landed like a gunshot. Then the image appeared. Not a blurry paparazzi capture. My official press photo. Taken 3 weeks earlier for the Time Person of the Year shortlist. Tailored black suit. Global Tech Summit stage. My gaze steady. Lethal unflinching. Beneath it, net worth, $3.2 billion. The silence was total. Suffocating. Like all the air had been ripped from the room. Brian's fork slipped from his hand, striking porcelain with a sharp clang, like a funeral bell. Susan gasped, fingers flying to her mouth. Aunt Patricia froze mid-chew. But Zachary was the masterpiece. All color drained from his face, leaving behind a sickly gray. His mouth fell open. He stared from the screen to me, then back again, his mind fracturing as it tried to merge two impossible truths, the nanny at the table and the titan on television. Vance, a prodigy in neural engineering, the reporter continued, personally built Neuralink's core architecture. Retaining a controlling stake, she is now among the youngest self-made female billionaires in history. Insiders describe her as brilliant, relentless, and singularly focused. I didn't look at the TV. I looked at them. I watched understanding crash into them like a tidal wave. The neatly printed nanny schedule on the table suddenly looked absurd. The $8,500 in my pocket felt insulting, like spare change offered to a deity. Anna, Susan whispered, shaking. Is that you? I lifted my glass and took an unhurried sip. The Vanderbilts will need to find someone else, I said calmly. I'm occupied running a multi-billion-dollar company. The illusion they built, the one where I was the failure and they were the benefactors, shattered instantly. I sat untouched at the epicenter of the wreckage. Chaos followed. Not loud panic. Not screaming. It was worse. Furtive, desperate movement. Like rats realizing the ship was already sinking. Zachary's phone buzzed. Once. Twice. Then it erupted, vibrating violently against the mahogany surface. He glanced down. Whatever color remained drained away completely. It's the managing partner, he croaked. My phone buzzed at the same time. I didn't need to check. My chief of staff, confirming the embargo was lifted. Still, I unlocked it with an easy swipe. You should take that, I said. He sounds concerned. Zachary stared at his phone like it might explode. He didn't answer. Instead, he looked at me, eyes wide, stripped bare. The smugness was gone. What remained was terror. The look of a man realizing his entire future had been built on a lie now exposed to daylight. You knew, he whispered. You knew we were pitching Neuralink. I did, I said. And I know you told your partners you had an in with the founder, that you were cultivating a relationship. Correct? He recoiled. You assumed I was irrelevant, I continued. You assumed I was desperate enough to be used. You sold me as leverage without consent. You lied to your firm, Zachary. You committed fraud. Now, wait, Brian interjected weakly. Let's not throw around words like fraud. He was being proactive, ambitious. You understand ambition. I laughed sharp, cold. He gambled his future on a sister he openly despises. Ridiculed me while secretly begging for my approval. I met Zachary's gaze. Want to know why your firm never heard back? He nodded, numb. Because I blocked it. Personally, I saw your name on the lead counsel list and flagged it. Do not engage. I told my legal team your firm lacks the integrity Neuralink requires. He looked nauseous. Anna, please. You can't. I'm up for partner. You already lost, I said quietly. The moment you decided I was beneath you. Every interruption. Every insult. 10 minutes ago when you called me a failure. I leaned forward. You don't speak for me, Zachary. And you don't speak for my company. And after tonight, you won't ever have that chance again. I'm cutting your firm off. Permanently. Not just from Neuralink, but from every affiliate, every partner, every entity tied to my network. And as Susan let out a sharp cry. He's your brother. You're destroying his life. I'm not destroying anything, I replied evenly. I'm correcting the balance. He sold something he never owned, and now the invoice has arrived. Zachary's phone finally stopped vibrating. A voicemail alert appeared on the screen. He stared at it, already knowing what it said. The quiet that followed pressed down on the room, thick and airless. The order of power had flipped. The nanny had become the client. The Titan was now the one begging. And I was the only person in the room who felt calm. Brian had never been familiar with defeat. His entire sense of self was built around being the provider, the authority, the man who controlled the money. Seeing his son unravel had rattled him, but instinct took over. He pivoted, attempting to rewrite reality as it unfolded. Well, he said, forcing a cheerful note that cracked at the edges, this is unexpected, but wonderful, really. A billionaire in the family. I always knew you had it in you, Anna. I always said you were exceptional. You said I was wasting my time, I reminded him. You said I was going nowhere. Tough love, he exclaimed, spreading his hands. We were pushing you, motivating you. And look, it worked. Everything you know about business came from me. The discipline, the focus. That was my doing. He scanned the table, fishing for agreement. We should be celebrating my daughter, the Titan. This house, this lifestyle. I built the base so you could rise. I stared at him, stunned by the sheer nerve. He was trying to take ownership of a success he had openly ridiculed. He was reframing cruelty as strategy. You built this foundation? I asked quietly. Of course, Brian replied, puffing up. I've provided everything for this family. This roof over your head, that's my blood and sweat. Is it? I asked. I took out my phone. There was no need to raise my voice. The silence was so complete that even a whisper felt loud. I opened my banking app, selected the North Shore Holdings sub-account, and tapped airplane mode. The Bloomberg feed vanished from the 85-inch TV. In its place appeared a spreadsheet. North Shore Holdings LLC, monthly outgoing wires. Mortgage principal and interest. Beneficiary, Chicago Trust Mortgage Servicer. Reference, 1420 Lakeshore Drive. Brian and Susan Vance. The rows kept scrolling, 60 of them. 5 years of payments. Every month. $12,450 each. The room locked into stillness. The kind you hear in a courtroom right after a guilty verdict is read. What is this? Susan whispered, squinting at the screen. This, I said, gesturing toward the TV, is the ledger for the shell company that owns your mortgage. Brian's face flushed deep red. That's private financial information. Turn that off. You said you built this foundation, I continued calmly. But the truth is, 5 years ago you were broke. Weeks away from foreclosure. The bank was preparing to take this house. I met his eyes. You didn't tell me, but I knew. So I bought the debt. I created North Shore Holdings and acquired your mortgage so you wouldn't have to endure the shame of bankruptcy. For 5 years, I paid everything. Mortgage, property taxes, insurance, every cent. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the envelope with the $8,500 inside, tossing it onto the table. It landed softly beside the untouched lemon tart. You tried to give me charity using my own money, I said. You played the provider, the generous patriarch tossing crumbs to his failed daughter. But you weren't the provider, I continued. You were the dependent. For 5 years, I had kept a roof over their heads. Brian sank back into his chair, hollowed out. The illusion of authority, the myth of the king in his castle, collapsed in real time. He wasn't a king. He was a tenant living by his daughter's grace. I never wanted to shame you, I said. I wanted you to keep your dignity. But you used that dignity to diminish me. I didn't know, Brian stammered. You didn't want to know, I corrected. It was easier to believe I was nothing than to accept that you needed me. Susan was crying openly now, her face buried in her hands. Zachary stared down at the table, unable to lift his head. The shame filled the room like a physical weight. You owe me $680,000, I said casually. But don't worry, I'm not collecting. Consider it the price of my freedom. I stood. The chair scraped loudly against the floor, the only sound left. The spreadsheet still glowed on the screen, a digital monument to their hypocrisy. It was done. I walked toward the foyer, my heels echoing against the marble with finality. Behind me, the family remained frozen in the dining room, trapped inside their own exposure. Just before I reached the heavy oak door, I heard a chair shift. Anna, wait. Susan hurried into the hallway, her face streaked with tears, her hands trembling as she reached toward me and stopped. Please, she sobbed. We never meant to hurt you. We wanted you safe. We were scared for you. Can't you see that? We're proud of you. Now we can be a real family. We can start over. Brian stepped in behind her, aged and broken. Your mother's right, he said quietly. We're proud. For $1 billion, Anna. You've won. You proved us wrong. Let us celebrate you. I turned to face them one last time. I saw the tears, the pleading, the sudden hunger to claim me. And I felt nothing. The anger was gone. The desire for revenge had dissolved. What remained was a deep, steady clarity. That's the problem, I said softly. You're proud of the billions, the valuation, the numbers, the possession. Of course, Brian insisted. It's success. It's security. No, I said. It's status. And that's all you've ever cared about. You see the money and think I've won. But you still don't see me. I stepped closer, my voice low and even. I didn't build Neuralink to get rich. I built it to solve something that mattered, to help people walk again, to change lives, not just my balance sheet. That's the difference between us. You measure life by what you own. I measure it by who I am. We can learn, Susan pleaded. Teach us. I can't, I said, because you only started listening once you saw the price tag. Your respect comes with a fee, and I'm done paying it. I looked past my father to Zachary, standing in the doorway, stripped of his former arrogance. Your table is too small for me, I said. Your mansion is too small. Your idea of success is too small. I didn't just out-earn you, I continued. I outgrew you. I pulled the $8,500 from my pocket and placed it on the hallway table beside the crystal vase. Keep it, I said. You'll need it for the movers. I opened the front door. Cold Chicago air hit my face, sharp, clean. A black SUV waited at the curb, engine running. My security team stood ready to take me to the private airfield. I stepped into the night without looking back. As the car pulled away, I picked up my tablet. A notification waited for approval, a $10 million grant to a pediatric spinal research center in Boston. I tapped approve. The silence inside the vehicle was vast, not the silence of neglect or dismissal, but the silence of open space. Limitless. I wasn't the daughter who needed fixing. I wasn't the sister who needed a job. I was Anna Vance. And for the first time in my life, the quiet wasn't a cage. It was a kingdom. Have you ever had to outgrow the people who raised you? Share your story in the comments. And if you believe in building in silence, hit that follow button.